Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel to one of the quietest and most focused places in the entire medieval world, the scriptorium of a monastery. In an age before the printing press, every single book was a priceless handmade work of art, and it was here in these silent rooms that they were created. We are going to follow the slow, patient, and deeply meditative life of one of the anonymous artists who decorated these magnificent treasures. Frankly, it's a job that required the patience of a saint, which was convenient, as you were often tasked with painting a picture of one. A single beautiful page could take a month to complete. It is not a career for those who enjoy instant gratification. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always a huge encouragement. For those of you already settled in, I'd love to see where and when you're listening from. Go ahead and drop your city and local time in the comments. I'm recording this in the middle of a hot and humid Thursday afternoon, here in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, which is a perfect time for a quiet rest. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The gentle whir of the fan fades. It is replaced by a sound that is both immense and profoundly gentle. It is the deep, resonant, and slow tolling of a great bronze bell. Bong, bong. The sound rolls across a cold, dark, and sleeping landscape. It is the sound that marks the beginning of your day. Your name is Brother Thomas, and you are a monk. The bell is the call to matins, the first of the 8 daily prayer services that structure your entire existence. You swing your legs out from your simple straw-stuffed pallet in the monastery's long, cold dormitory. The air is chilly and you pull your coarse wool habit around you. The vow of poverty certainly makes getting dressed in the morning very simple. The age-old problem of "I have nothing to wear" is completely solved. You have, quite literally, nothing to wear except for this one specific robe. You and the other monks, dozens of silent, dark-robed figures, file out of the dormitory and walk through the covered stone cloisters towards the chapel. The only light is the faint, ghostly light of the moon and stars, and the single candle held by the lead monk. The only sound is the soft shuffle of your simple leather shoes on the cold flagstones. You enter the great, dark chapel. The air is cold and smells of old stone, melting beeswax, and the faint sweet scent of yesterday's incense. You take your place in the choir stalls, and then the service begins. The sound that fills the darkness is the ancient, haunting, and beautiful sound of Gregorian chant. A single pure voice begins, and then the others join, the melodies rising and falling in the vast, echoing space. This is the Opus Dei, the work of God, and it is the foundation upon which your entire day is built. The life of a medieval monk was rigorously structured around this cycle of prayer, a constant rhythmic conversation with God after the service. As the first pale gray light of dawn begins to appear in the high chapel windows, you proceed to a simple, silent breakfast of bread and weak ale in the refectory. Being a monk in the Middle Ages was not a guarantee of a quiet, scholarly life. For every one monk like yourself, destined for the scriptorium, there were 20 others whose work was to bake the bread, brew the ale, tend the gardens, or muck out the stables. Everyone had their role in this self-sufficient, miniature world. Historians often debate the literacy rates within these monasteries. Was every monk a learned scholar who could read Latin fluently? Or were many monks functionally illiterate, with the highly skilled work of copying and illuminating books reserved for a small, educated elite within the community? Your morning meal is over. The time for the nourishment of the spirit and the body is complete. Now begins the time for the labor manuum, the work of the hands. While other monks head to the fields or the workshops, you and a select group of 5 other brothers turn and walk towards a specific room, located on the north side of the cloister to receive the best and most consistent light of the day. You have arrived at the scriptorium. And it is here, in the quietest, cleanest, and most sacred room in the entire monastery, apart from the chapel itself, that your true life's work begins. You push open the heavy oak door to the scriptorium. The hinges do not creak. They have been well oiled with beeswax for this very reason. In this room, silence is not merely a preference. It is a sacred and strictly enforced rule. You step inside. The air is cool and still, and it smells of old vellum, which has a faint, clean animal scent, of ink, a sharp metallic tang of oak galls and iron salts, and of the beeswax used to coat the writing tablets. It is the perfume of the written word. This is the quietest room in the entire monastery, a place of intense, focused, and holy labor. The scriptorium is a long, narrow hall, positioned to catch the steady, indirect light from the north, which is best for detailed work. There are no roaring fireplaces here. A stray spark could destroy years of work in an instant, so the room is often cold. Along the large, clear-paned windows are rows of simple, slanted wooden desks. There are no comfortable chairs, only hard, backless stools and benches, designed to keep you upright and attentive. The Benedictine rule, which governs the life of your monastery, places a profound emphasis on silence as a tool for spiritual contemplation, a way to quiet the noise of the world so that one might better hear the voice of God. Here in the scriptorium, this spiritual rule has a deeply practical purpose. The work of copying a sacred text is an act of prayer, and it requires absolute concentration. A single moment of distraction, a single overheard word, could cause a scribe to make an error, corrupting the holy text for all future generations who would read it. But how do you work in a room with a dozen other men without ever speaking? Over the centuries, the monks have developed a solution: a complex and extensive sign language, used only in the scriptorium. You see it in action as you enter. A young scribe needs a new book to copy. He catches the eye of the librarian monk and makes a gesture of turning invisible pages. The librarian touches his own ear, the sign for listen, and the scribe then makes the sign for a psalter, placing his hands on his head in the shape of a crown, to signify King David, the author of the Psalms. To ask for a pagan text, a book by an author like Ovid or Cicero, a monk would make the slightly insulting gesture of scratching his ear like a dog. It's a complete silent language. There's probably even a sign for Brother Michael's snoring during the sermon was disgraceful. Or, did you see what the abbot was wearing today? It is a very efficient and very quiet form of workplace gossip. The room is not truly silent. It is filled with the soft, gentle, and repetitive sounds of the work itself. It is the most soothing ambient sound you can imagine. There is the quiet, rhythmic scratch of a dozen quill pens moving across the surface of the vellum. There is the soft, deep rustle as a monk turns the great, heavy page of a massive Bible. There is the faint ceramic clink as someone dips their quill into a stone ink pot. And there is the sharp, abrasive sound of a monk using a small, curved knife to carefully scrape a tiny error from the surface of a page. It is the quietest workshop in the world. The loudest sound you are likely to hear all day is someone sneezing, which will be a major, scandalous event, prompting a flurry of disapproving hand gestures for the rest of the week. Historians debate the lived experience of this enforced silence. Was it a serene, meditative state that fostered a deep and profound spiritual connection to the work? Or was it, for some, a source of immense psychological stress and frustration, a denial of the basic human need for social interaction? You walk to your own assigned desk by the window. It is your small personal island in this sea of quiet concentration. It is bare, except for your tools, which you have arranged with meticulous care. You have your ink pots, your carefully sharpened quills, your burnishing stones, and your fine-tipped brushes. You sit on your hard stool, take a deep breath to still your mind, and say a silent prayer for a steady hand and a clear eye. You have a long day of incredibly detailed, painstaking work ahead of you that requires absolute, unbroken concentration. And you are not allowed to talk to anyone. For some people, this would be a nightmare. For you, an Illuminator, it is just Tuesday. You see Brother Michael, the stern, elderly head scribe, approaching your desk. He moves with a slow, deliberate grace. In his hands, he is carrying a large, flat sheet of creamy white vellum. It is the page you will be working on today. Brother Michael arrives at your desk and, with the solemnity of a priest presenting a sacred relic at the altar, he lays the large sheet of vellum before you. This is your canvas for the day. He does not speak, of course, but his entire being radiates a stern and demanding expectation of absolute perfection. You look at the page. It is a magnificent thing in its own right. A single large sheet of the finest calfskin vellum, so white and smooth it seems to glow with a soft, buttery light. And it is already a work of art. Brother Michael, the head scribe, has spent the last several days on this single page. It is covered in 2 perfect ruler-straight columns of dense black Gothic script. Every letter is a masterpiece of precision and control, as uniform and as elegant as a line of marching soldiers. This is how a great illuminated manuscript is created. It is not the work of a single artist, but a highly specialized and collaborative assembly line. First, the parchmenter would have prepared the animal's skin. Then, a ruler would have used a stylus to impress faint, invisible guidelines onto the page. Then, the scribe, Brother Michael, would have painstakingly written the main text. And now, the page has come to you, the Illuminator. For its final and most glorious stage, Brother Michael points a long bony finger at the blank spaces he has left for you. There is a large empty square at the top of the first column, a space for the main miniature illustration. There are smaller blank squares for the decorative initial letters that will begin the major verses. And there are the wide, generous margins around the text, which you are to fill with an intricate border of vines and flowers. He inspects your desk, your pots of pigment, your brushes. His expression suggests that he believes you, as an artist, are a naturally chaotic and unpredictable being who might, at any moment, lose control and spill a pot of bright red paint all over his flawless, perfect lettering. He does not entirely trust you. Your art is beautiful, but his text is the sacred word of God. You feel the immense weight of the responsibility. This single sheet of vellum is an object of incredible value. A single large book might require the skins of over 100 calves. The weeks of labor already invested in this one page, the preparation of the skin, the ruling, the days of a master scribe's work, are now in your hands. You are the final stage of the process, and you are not allowed to make a mistake. The scribes themselves were acutely aware of the difficulty of their own work. In the final pages of a manuscript, they would sometimes add a personal note, a colophon. These notes are a wonderfully human glimpse into their lives. They often complained about the physical hardships of the job, the poor light, the cold that stiffened their fingers, the ache in their backs from hunching over the desk for hours on end. One famous, anonymous scribe wrote at the end of his book, "Writing is excessive drudgery. It crooks your back, it dims your sight, it twists your stomach and your sides. Oh, reader, turn the pages gently and keep your fingers far from the letters." It's nice to know that complaining about your job is a noble tradition that stretches back for centuries. Even holy men in a silent monastery would get to the end of a big project and basically write, "My back hurts and my hand is cramping." The end. Paleographers, the scholars who study ancient handwriting, sometimes debate whether you can detect the emotional state of a scribe just by looking at their script. Can you see the fatigue and the slight waver of a line at the end of a long day? Can you sense the frustration in a scraped-out error? Brother Michael taps the large, empty square on the page. Then he makes a series of signs with his hands. The book is a psalter, the book of Psalms. This is the first page of the first psalm. He makes the sign for the letter B, for beatus vir. Blessed is the man. Then he makes the sign of a crown, and the gesture of playing a harp. Your task is to create a historiated initial, a great letter B, that contains within it a whole narrative scene. The author of the Psalms, King David himself, sitting on his throne and playing his harp. You are to paint a detailed, realistic portrait of a king and his entire musical instrument, with a background of pure, shining gold, all inside a space roughly the size of a large postage stamp. No pressure, Brother Michael gives you one last, long, meaningful look, a silent command of "Do not ruin my beautiful page." and then he turns and glides away to his own desk. You are left alone with the page. You look at the perfect black script and the terrifyingly blank white spaces. The day's great, quiet work is about to begin. But before you can even think about gold or paint, you must first prepare the very surface of the skin itself. Your work begins not with a brush, but with a simple piece of cloth. The vellum before you is smooth and beautiful, but it is still fundamentally an animal's skin. It retains a microscopic, invisible layer of natural grease. If you were to apply paint or ink to it now, the liquid would bead up, refusing to adhere properly. The surface must be prepared. Your first act is one of purification. You take a small soft linen bag. It is filled with a fine whitish powder, a mixture of chalk and ground pumice stone. This is your pounce pot. You gently tap the bag over the blank areas of the page where you will work, and a fine, abrasive dust settles onto the vellum. Then, with the clean, dry heel of your hand, you begin to rub this powder into the surface of the skin in slow, meditative, circular motions. This process, known as pouncing, is a crucial and non-negotiable first step for any scribe or illuminator. The slightly abrasive pumice powder removes the last traces of grease from the vellum and creates an incredibly fine tooth, a microscopic texture on the surface for the ink and paint to grip onto. The chalk helps to absorb the grease and to whiten the page, making it even more luminous. It is the medieval version of sanding and priming a surface before you paint it. Except the surface is a priceless piece of animal skin, and if you rub too hard, you could create a thin spot or a hole and find yourself in a great deal of trouble with Brother Michael. The stakes are considerably higher than home decorating. As you perform this slow, repetitive task, you are reminded of the organic nature of your canvas. You can still see, if you look very closely, the faint pinpricked pattern of the calf's hair follicles on the surface. This is the hair side of the vellum. The other side, the side that was the inside of the skin, is smoother and is known as the flesh side. A great deal of care was taken in the scriptorium to arrange the pages of a book so that, when it was opened, a hair side would always face another hair side, and a flesh side would always face a flesh side, creating a pleasing visual uniformity. So when you read a medieval book, you're not just reading words. You are looking at the faint, ghostly pattern of a calf's skin. It is a thought that is both slightly morbid and a powerful reminder of the deeply physical, handmade nature of the object. Codicologists, the scholars who study manuscripts as physical objects, often debate the specific recipes and techniques used for pouncing. While pumice and chalk were common, some medieval treatises mention using the powdered, ground-up bone of a cuttlefish or even fine dry bread crumbs to prepare the page. With each scriptorium having its own secret, preferred method, you continue your slow, circular rubbing. The only sound is the soft, abrasive whisper of the powder on the skin and the distant, haunting sound of your brothers chanting the psalms in the chapel. It is a peaceful, focused, and almost trance-like state. Your mind is cleared of all other thoughts. There is only the feel of the smooth vellum, the texture of the dust, and the simple, important task at hand. Finally, you are done. You take a very soft, broad brush, perhaps made from the feathers of a swan, and with a series of gentle sweeping motions, you dust away every last particle of the pounce powder. You are left with a perfect, pristine, and slightly matte surface. It is absolutely clean. It is probably the most well-exfoliated surface in the entire monastery, including the monks themselves. It is now ready for the next, even more delicate stage. The physical preparation of the page is complete. The canvas is ready. Now you must transfer the intricate design that you will paint from your mind, or from your book of patterns, onto the page itself. But you cannot use ink or charcoal for this, as that would be impossible to erase. You need a ghost. You need a line that is barely there. The vellum is ready. It is a perfect, luminous, and terrifyingly blank canvas. The time has come to draw. But you cannot use ink for this. Ink is permanent, unforgiving, a final statement. This stage requires a line like a ghost. a faint silver shadow that will serve as your hidden guide for the later application of gold and paint. You pick up your stylus. It is a simple, slender tool, a piece of wood with a fine pointed tip made from a soft metal alloy, mostly silver. This is the art of silver point. As you draw, the silver tip leaves a tiny amount of the metal on the abrasive, prepared surface of the vellum, creating a delicate, pale gray line that shimmers faintly when it catches the light. This was a common and highly skilled drawing technique used by artists and scribes for centuries, long before the invention of the graphite pencil. Great masters of the later Renaissance like Leonardo da Vinci would use silver point to create some of their most beautiful and delicate drawings. Before you begin, you might consult your pattern book. This is a small personal book where you have copied designs and motifs, a particular style of vine for a border, a graceful way to draw a hand, the folds of a saint's robe. It is your personal reference library, a collection of solutions to artistic problems you have solved in the past. Then the work begins. You are not pressing hard. Your touch must be as light as a feather. The world shrinks to the tiny silver point of the stylus and the almost inaudible, whispery sound it makes as it moves across the page. This is the medieval equivalent of using tracing paper, but with significantly more pressure to get it right. A single misplaced line, and your King David might end up with a very strange-looking nose for all eternity. There are no undo buttons in the scriptorium. With painstaking care, you trace the outline of the great historiated initial B. You draw the frame of the miniature scene within its curves. You sketch the figure of King David on his throne, his hands poised over his harp. Then you begin the border, a complex weaving pattern of vines and ivy leaves that will run up and down the margins, a beautiful frame for Brother Michael's severe and perfect text. You use other tools as well. A small pair of compasses, its points sharp, to draw the perfect circle for King David's halo. A straight-edged ruler, perhaps made of polished wood or bone, to ensure the frame of the miniature is perfectly square. The art of illumination was a beautiful fusion of freehand, organic drawing and strict geometric precision. It's good to know that even saints in the 13th century benefited from the proper application of geometry. A wobbly halo would be very distracting for the pious reader. Art historians often debate the degree to which an illuminator like you was an original artist versus a skilled copyist. How much freedom did you have in designing this page? Were you strictly copying a master design from an approved pattern book provided by the abbot? Or did you have the artistic freedom to create your own composition, to add your own personal creative flourishes and doodles, the famous marginalia, in the borders? The answer likely depended on the importance of the book and the reputation of the artist. After what feels like an hour of intense, silent concentration, the tracing is complete. You hold the vellum sheet at an angle to the light from the window. The entire complex design is now visible, laid out in faint, shimmering, ghostly silver lines. It is a secret map that only you can truly see. To anyone else, it still looks like a page of text with some blank spaces. You are a master of nearly invisible art. It's a very niche skill set. The ghost of the design is in place. But before you can apply the shining gold, you must give it something to rest on. The gold leaf cannot be applied directly to the flat vellum. It needs a raised, cushioned bed that will give it depth and brilliance. You must now begin the next, even more delicate and nerve-wracking stage of the process. You must build the foundation. You must apply the gesso. The faint silver lines of your drawing are your guide. They are the ghost of the image to come. Now you must build upon them, creating a raised, three-dimensional foundation for the gold leaf. This is the art of applying the gesso. You turn from your main desk to a small side table where you do your preparatory work. Here you have a small pot of your gesso, a thick, white, plaster-like paste that you have prepared according to the secret recipe of your monastery scriptorium. It is a simple but crucial mixture, likely made from finely powdered gypsum or chalk, mixed with a binder of animal hide glue and a little sugar or honey to give it the right consistency. Applying the gesso is like trying to ice a very, very small and very, very expensive cake with a tool no bigger than a toothpick. You do not use a brush as the paste is too thick. Instead, you might use the hollow barrel of a large quill or a specially shaped metal tool. You dip your tool into the thick, white paste and then, with an incredibly steady hand, you begin to paint it onto the page, carefully filling in the areas that will be gilded. You are staying exactly within the faint silver lines you have already drawn. The goal is to build up a small, raised, and perfectly smooth cushion of this plaster on every area that is to receive gold. You apply it to the background of the main miniature of King David. You carefully trace the body of the great historiated initial B, and you pick out small leaves and buds within the vinework of the border. This use of a raised gesso base was the key technique for creating the brilliant, almost jewel-like three-dimensional effect of burnished gold that is the hallmark of the finest illuminated manuscripts. The raised, cushioned surface catches the light from multiple angles, giving the gold a depth and a warmth that flat gilding could never achieve. The work is incredibly slow and requires absolute concentration. A single tremor of your hand, a single lumpy application, will show up as a glaring flaw in the final gilded surface. Brother Michael does not approve of lumpy gold, and some traditions, illuminators would mix a colored pigment into their gesso. A reddish-brown clay called bole was often used. This red color beneath the gold leaf would give the finished gilding a warmer, richer, and deeper tone. So the secret to a truly beautiful warm gold finish was to first put down a layer of what looked like reddish-brown mud. It is very counterintuitive. The art of illumination is full of these strange, multi-step processes that make no sense until you see the final, glorious result. It requires a great deal of trust in the process. Manuscript conservators today can analyze the precise chemical composition of the gesso on a surviving manuscript. By identifying the specific type of chalk or the unique protein signature of the animal glue, they can sometimes trace a book's origin back to a specific monastic scriptorium, which might have had its own unique, jealously guarded recipe. After what feels like an hour of painstaking microscopic work, you have applied the gesso to all the necessary areas. The page must now be set aside to dry completely. This can take many hours. Patience is the illuminator's greatest virtue. Once the gesso is bone dry, transformed from a soft paste into a hard, brilliant white solid, there is one last step. You take a special burnishing tool, or a very fine, curved knife, and you gently polish the surface of the raised gesso until it is perfectly, immaculately, glassy smooth. Any tiny bump or imperfection in the surface of the gesso will show through the gossamer thin gold leaf. The surface must be smoother than a polished stone, smoother than glass, smoother than a nobleman's flattering promise. It has to be absolutely perfect. The level of perfectionism required for this job is staggering. It makes you understand why so many of the older monks look so perpetually tired. Finally, it is ready. You look at the page. The perfect black script of Brother Michael. Your own faint, ghostly silver lines. And now these beautiful raised, perfectly smooth white pillows of gesso, sitting expectantly on the surface. The bed for the gold has been made. The next, most magical, most nerve-wracking, and most beautiful step of all is about to begin. The gesso is dry, hard, and polished to a perfect glassy smoothness. The moment has now come. This next step is the very heart of your art as an illuminator. It is the part of the process that gives a manuscript its name. It is the act that brings light into the book. It requires the steadiest hand, the calmest heart, and most strangely, the most delicate and controlled breath. You turn to your gilder's tools. You have a small, soft cushion made of leather, a special flat-bladed knife, and a wide, flat brush called a gilder's tip, made from the finest, softest squirrel hair. And of course you have the gold itself. It is a small book of gold leaf, each page containing a square of pure gold that has been beaten by hand until it is impossibly, unimaginably thin. It is so thin that it is translucent. If you were to hold a sheet up to a candle, you could see the light through it. It is so light that the slightest draft in the room or even a heavy sigh could send it fluttering away into a wrinkled, unusable mess. With the gilder's knife, you carefully cut a small piece of the gold leaf, just large enough to cover one of the raised gesso areas, the background of the King David miniature. The gold now sits on your cushion, a fragile, shimmering square. Now comes the magic. The gesso on the page is bone dry. The gold leaf will not stick to it. You need an adhesive, but you do not apply a paste or a glue. You create the adhesive with your own body. This is the technique of the gilder's breath. You lean in very close to the page, your face just inches from the raised white pillow of gesso. You take a slow, quiet breath, and then you exhale a single, gentle, warm, and humid puff of air directly onto the gesso. Howa! It is not a blow. It is a whisper, a warm sigh. The moisture from your breath is just enough to reactivate the animal glue in the gesso, making its surface, for a few precious seconds, perfectly and uniformly tacky. This technique was the standard and most masterful method for applying gold leaf in all of medieval illumination. The hygroscopic or water-attracting nature of the gesso meant that the gilder's own breath was the perfect tool for creating a temporary, flawless adhesive surface. It is a technique that requires a very specific kind of breathing. Not a sneeze, not a cough, not the weary sigh of a monk who has been sitting on a hard wooden stool for 6 hours. Just a perfect, gentle puff of warm, damp air. It's like you're trying to steam a tiny plaster pillow with your own mouth. The job of an illuminator is very strange indeed. In the second after you have breathed on the gesso, you must act. You take your gilder's tip. To help the gold leaf cling to it, you might quickly and lightly brush it against your own hair, generating the tiniest spark of static electricity. You then touch the brush to the piece of gold leaf on your cushion. The gold leaps onto the brush. And then with an impossibly steady hand, you lower the brush and press the gold leaf firmly onto the now tacky gesso. So, the complete process is: breathe on the page, rub a brush on your head, pick up a piece of gold leaf, and try not to have a nervous breakdown from the pressure. It's a very precise and slightly bizarre workflow. You certainly wouldn't want to attempt it after a large cup of coffee, if coffee had been invented yet. Conservators and art historians still debate the subtle chemistry of this process. Did different types of animal glue used in the gesso, perhaps made from rabbit skin or fish, require a different level of humidity or a different temperature of breath to achieve the perfect tackiness? The secret recipes of the scriptorium are a field of active and fascinating research. The gold leaf is now stuck fast to the gesso. It looks a little messy with tiny ragged bits of gold overlapping the edges. You take a very soft, dry brush and gently whisk away all the excess flakes. What is left is a perfect, solid patch of gold, exactly covering the gessoed area. But it is not yet the brilliant, shining gold you imagine. It is a soft, matte, slightly lumpy gold. It looks a bit like you've accidentally stuck a piece of a candy wrapper onto the page. You must trust that the next step will fix everything. Patiently, you repeat the process. Breathe, lift, press. Breathe, lift, press. You cover every last area of the gesso, from the great initial B to the tiniest leaf bud in the border, with this soft, sleeping gold. The page is now transformed, a patchwork of perfect black script and dull yellow gold. The light has been brought to the page, but it is not yet awake. The page is now gilded, but the gold is quiet. It is sleeping. The matte, yellowish patches sit on the page, holding the light but not reflecting it. They do not yet possess the fire of heaven. Your next task is to wake the gold up, to polish it into a state of divine and brilliant light. For this you need your burnisher. It is a simple tool, a short wooden or bone handle with a single, perfectly smooth, and very hard stone set into the end. The stone might be a deep red hematite, also known as bloodstone, or a piece of beautifully banded agate, polished over many years until its surface is smoother than glass. Some illuminators, it is said, even used the tooth of a wolf, believing its natural enamel gave the most perfect shine. You take your burnisher in your hand. The stone is cool and heavy. You place a clean, soft piece of linen over the page to protect the ungilded areas, and you begin the most satisfying part of your entire craft. You start to rub the surface of the matte gold leaf with your polished stone. The work is gentle but firm. You move the burnisher back and forth, or in small, tight circles, applying a steady pressure. The only sound in the entire silent scriptorium is the faint, rhythmic, and almost musical squeak, squeak, squeak of the hard stone gliding over the soft, thin metal. And as you work, a miracle happens. Under the pressure and friction of the burnisher, the dull, soft gold is transformed. The microscopic imperfections in the surface are smoothed away. The metal is compressed against the hard, smooth gesso base beneath it, and the gold awakens. It begins to shine. It changes from a soft matte yellow into a brilliant, hard, and perfect mirror. It no longer just holds the light. It catches it and throws it back at you with a dazzling liquid brilliance. It is like you are polishing a captured piece of the sun itself. It is the most satisfying job in the entire monastery. For hours, you have been performing painstaking, nerve-wracking tasks that require immense precision. Now, with a simple, repetitive act of rubbing, you are creating pure, dazzling light. It's like you're a magician whose only trick is polishing things really well to protect the fragile gold from any microscopic flaw on the surface of your burnishing stone. You might place a piece of the thinnest, finest silk between the stone and the gold leaf as you work. The level of meticulous care is astounding. You have to hold your breath while laying the gold, and now you have to be impossibly gentle while polishing it. It's probably best to just learn not to breathe at all while in the scriptorium. Material scientists and art conservators today debate the subtle physics of this process. Would a burnisher made of hematite, which is an iron oxide, have imparted a slightly different, warmer polish to the gold than a tool made from pure, neutral agate? The subtle variations in the warmth and color of the shine on different manuscripts might be a secret fingerprint of the specific tools and techniques used by each monastic workshop. Patiently, you move from one gilded area to the next. You burnish the great shining background of the King David miniature. You polish the body of the initial B until it gleams. You trace the delicate, golden vine leaves in the border, each one now a tiny, brilliant mirror. After what feels like an hour of this peaceful, repetitive work, you are finished. You lift the page and gently tilt it in the light from the window. It is transformed. The perfect, severe black script of Brother Michael is now woven with lines and fields of pure, shining gold that flash and glitter with every movement. The page is now incredibly beautiful and incredibly shiny. It is also now probably worth more than the entire flock of sheep the monastery owns. The pressure to not make a mistake during the final stage, the painting, has just increased tenfold the illumination. The light of the page is now complete. But it is a stark and simple beauty, a world of only black and gold. Now, you must bring the rest of creation to the page. You must bring the color. You move from your main desk to the small side table where you prepare your paints. Your work with gold is done. Your work with the ground-up treasures of the earth is about to begin. The gold is now awake, shining on the page with a light that seems to come from within. But a world of only black ink and golden light is a stark and simple one. Your page needs color to truly come to life. It needs the blue of the heavens, the green of the earth, and the rich red of a king's robe. You now move from your main desk to the grinding slab, where you will perform the slow and dusty alchemy of turning hard rock into liquid color. You begin with the most precious and sacred color of all, blue. You unlock a small wooden box, and from it, you take a rough, dark blue stone, flecked with glittering golden-colored inclusions. It looks like a piece of the night sky fallen to earth. This is lapis lazuli in medieval Europe. This stone was a treasure of almost unimaginable rarity. The only known source in the entire world was a single, remote mountain valley in a place that is now Afghanistan. From these mines, the lapis lazuli had to be transported thousands of miles on the backs of mules and camels along the Silk Road, or by sea, passing through the hands of a dozen different merchants, before it finally reached your monastery. Ounce for ounce, it was far more valuable than pure gold. Its use in a manuscript was the ultimate display of devotion and luxury. Your first task is to grind it. This is not a delicate job, at least not at first. You wrap the stone in a heavy cloth and using a metal hammer, you carefully break it into smaller, more manageable pieces. Then you place these pieces on your grinding slab, a thick, perfectly flat piece of hard stone like porphyry. You take your stone muller, a kind of flat-bottomed pestle, and you begin to grind. The work is laborious, repetitive, and requires immense patience. You push the muller in a slow circular motion, crushing the hard crystalline rock into a powder. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound is dry and abrasive. It is another of the quiet, meditative rhythms of the scriptorium. This is another job that requires the patience of a saint and the arm muscles of a blacksmith. You are grinding a very, very expensive rock into very, very expensive dust. It is crucial not to sneeze. A single, ill-timed sneeze could blow the equivalent of a small farm's annual income right out the window. But just grinding the stone is not enough. The powder you create contains not only the brilliant blue mineral, lazurite, but also duller, grayish impurities like calcite. To create the most perfect, most luminous blue, ultramarine, meaning from beyond the sea, you must perform a complex purification. The ground powder is mixed with melted beeswax, resins, and oils to form a thick dough-like paste. This paste is then wrapped in a cloth and kneaded for days in a bath of lye. It is a strange and counterintuitive process. The finest, purest particles of the blue pigment will slowly leach out of the waxy dough and settle at the bottom of the lye bath, while the gray impurities remain trapped in the wax. So, to get the most beautiful blue, you must first grind a rock into dust, then bake it into a weird waxy cake, and then wash it for a week. It's like trying to make a simple cup of tea, but the recipe begins with first, invent the universe. Art historians and conservation scientists today can analyze the quality of the ultramarine pigment used in a manuscript to help determine its cost and the wealth of its patron. Was the blue in a saint's robe painted with the highest grade first extraction from the purification process, or a lesser, slightly grayer grade? The quality of the blue is a direct indicator of the book's prestige. After this long alchemical process, you are left with a small quantity of the most perfect, vibrant, and deeply saturated blue powder you have ever seen. It is the color of the sky on the clearest of days, the color of the deepest ocean. It is a color reserved for the most sacred of subjects, the robe of the Virgin Mary, or the background of a scene taking place in heaven. You look at the tiny pile of brilliant blue dust. It has taken you a week of hard labor to produce enough to paint a single small area of your page. It is the least cost-effective process in the world, but the result is undeniably divine. The color of heaven is now ready, but your miniature of King David will need more than just blue. It will need the colors of the earth as well. You carefully put away the precious ultramarine and turn back to your grinding slab. You pick up a different, much more common but still beautiful stone. It is a piece of rich green malachite. The divine celestial blue is ready, carefully stored in a small sealed pouch made from a pig's bladder. But King David, in your miniature, will be seated on the earth, and the intricate border of your page will be a living tangle of vines and leaves. Your page needs the color of nature. It needs green. You turn back to your grinding slab. This time you take a different kind of stone. It is a piece of malachite, and it is beautiful in its own right, with deep swirling bands of dark and light green. It is a copper ore, and it is much more common and less expensive than the lapis lazuli, but it produces a wonderfully rich and stable green. The grinding process is familiar but much easier. The malachite is a softer stone than the lapis, and it crumbles more readily under the weight of your stone muller. Soon you have reduced the vibrant green rock to a fine pale green powder. The work is still slow, still meditative, but it is less of an epic struggle. You feel much less likely to accidentally ruin a pigment that is worth more than the monastery's entire flock of sheep. Unlike the complex, multi-stage purification required for ultramarine, the process for malachite is simple. Once ground to a fine powder, the pigment is ready. Malachite was one of the most reliable and widely used green pigments in the medieval illuminator's palette. As a mineral, it was incredibly stable and resistant to fading over the centuries. This was in stark contrast to some of the other green pigments, which were made from plant sources. A green made from the juice of buckthorn berries, for example, might look beautiful when first painted, but it was notorious for fading to a dull brown over just a few decades. An illuminator also had another option for a vibrant green, a color called verdigris. It was made by the alchemical process of corroding copper plates with the fumes of vinegar. Verdigris produced a beautiful, bright, bluish green, but it had a terrible secret. It was highly acidic, and over the centuries, it could slowly and inexorably eat its way right through the vellum page, leaving a brittle brown hole where a beautiful green leaf used to be. Choosing the stable, gentle malachite was always the safer, more archival choice for a book that was meant to last for eternity. Brother Michael would be very displeased if, 200 years from now, your beautiful vine border had transformed into a series of ugly brown holes. Art conservators who study these manuscripts today can identify the specific pigments used, and this choice can tell a story. Does a manuscript use the expensive and permanent malachite, suggesting a wealthy patron and a well-funded, high-quality scriptorium? Or does it use the cheaper but more dangerous verdigris, or a fading plant-based green, suggesting a more modest budget or a less skilled artist? The very chemistry of the colors is a clue to the book's history. You look at your growing collection of pigments. You have the shining, otherworldly gold. You have the divine, celestial blue. And now you have this rich, earthy green. Your palette is expanding. You now have the colors of heaven and the colors of the earth. You have a small pile of blue dust and a small pile of green dust. Your desk is starting to look like the workspace of a very meticulous and artistic pixie. All this work, and you still haven't even picked up a brush. The blue is for the sky in your miniature. The green is for the grass at King David's feet and the leaves in the border. But David is a king, and a king needs a royal color. He needs a color of power, of wealth, and of sacred importance. He needs a brilliant, powerful red. You carefully sweep the last of the green malachite powder into a pouch, and then you turn to your box of raw materials and take out the final and most dangerous of your stones. It is a lump of cinnabar, a mineral of mercury sulfide, and from it, you will grind the most vibrant and most toxic of all your colors. Your palette is almost complete. You have the blue of heaven and the green of the earth. Now, you need the color of blood and fire, the color of kings, and the color of martyrs. You take the final stone in your hand. It is a heavy, dense, and deeply reddish rock. This is cinnabar. When ground into a fine powder, this mineral creates the most brilliant, vibrant, and opaque red pigment known to the medieval world, vermilion. It is a color of immense power and prestige, second only to ultramarine blue and gold in its value. And it is also dangerous. Cinnabar is mercury sulfide, a highly toxic substance. As you prepare to work with it, you take a precaution you didn't need for the other stones. You might tie a damp cloth over your nose and mouth, a simple primitive mask to protect you from inhaling the poisonous dust you are about to create. The pursuit of beauty, you understand, sometimes involves handling materials that really do not like you. The process of grinding the cinnabar is similar to the malachite. It is a relatively soft stone, and as you work it with your muller, it quickly breaks down into a powder of the most astonishing, fiery, and almost unnaturally bright red. This is the color you will use for the rich, crimson robes of King David in your miniature, a color befitting his royal status. In the visual language of the manuscript, red was a color of supreme importance. It was used for the robes of kings, of popes, and of Christ himself. It represented the blood of the martyrs, a symbol of their sacrifice and their faith. It was also the color of the divine love of God, and in a more practical sense, it was the color of emphasis. This is the job of the rubricator. a specialized scribe in the scriptorium whose entire task is to go through a finished manuscript and add the text that needs to stand out. The word rubric itself comes from the Latin rubrica, for red ochre. The rubricator would add the titles of chapters, the first letter of a new paragraph, and important headings in a clear, bright red ink. This was the medieval equivalent of using bold text or a highlighter. Without the rubricator, a long, dense manuscript would be an intimidating, unbroken wall of black text. He was the unsung hero of readability. Your work with the precious vermilion is the more luxurious, artistic, and high-stakes version of his craft. Art historians and chemists who analyze these manuscripts can often identify imitation vermilion in less expensive books. An artist might use a much cheaper and more common red ochre, essentially a form of rust or red clay, to try and mimic the brilliant scarlet of true cinnabar. Scholars debate the intention behind this. Was it a deliberate attempt to deceive a patron, to make a book seem more luxurious than it was? Or was it simply a matter of a more humble scriptorium using the best materials it could afford, with a clear and accepted hierarchy of pigments for different levels of commissions? You carefully scrape the last of the brilliant red powder from your grinding slab and place it in its own tightly sealed pouch. Your geology lesson for the day is complete. You have a collection of small pouches filled with incredibly valuable, and in one case moderately toxic dusts. You have the gold for divine light, the blue for heaven, the green for the earth, and the red for royalty and passion. But these are still just powders. They are not yet paint. They have no life, no ability to cling to the page. To transform them from dust into a living, workable color, you need one final, crucial, and surprisingly common ingredient. You need a binder. You carefully gather your precious pouches of pigment. You rise from your stool at the grinding table, your back aching slightly. You walk out of the absolute quiet of the scriptorium, back into the stone cloister, and you follow your nose towards the sounds and smells of the monastery's daily life. You are heading for the kitchen. You are going to get an egg. You walk into the monastery's kitchen. It is a world of jarring and chaotic contrast to the sacred silence of the scriptorium. It is hot, it is noisy, and it smells of baking bread, simmering vegetable stew, and wood smoke. The lay brothers who run the kitchen, large, cheerful, red-faced men, shout to each other over the bubbling pots. One of them, a man named Brother Philip, sees you and smiles. He knows why you are here. He wipes his floury hands on his apron, walks over to a basket of eggs gathered from the monastery's henhouse that very morning, and selects a single, perfect, brown egg. He hands it to you. This humble, everyday object, a symbol of new life, is the final, crucial ingredient that will bring your brilliant, powdered pigments to life. You carry the egg back to the quiet solitude of your desk in the scriptorium. Now the final act of alchemy begins. First, you must prepare the binder. You carefully crack the egg, letting the clear, watery egg white, the albumen, run into a spare pot. This glaire, as it is known, has its own uses as a binder, but it creates a thinner, more transparent paint. For the rich, opaque, jewel-like colors you need for your miniature, you must use the yolk. You gently pass the golden yolk back and forth between the two halves of the eggshell, letting the last of the white fall away. Then comes a delicate, almost surgical procedure. You dry the yolk by rolling it carefully in the palm of your hand, and then you hold it over a clean seashell and pierce the delicate membrane that encloses it. The pure, rich, golden liquid yolk runs out, leaving the empty, useless membrane behind. Now you are ready to make paint. You take your ceramic palette and place a small mound of your powdered green malachite onto it. With your finger, you make a small well in the center of the green dust. Into this well, you add a few drops of the pure egg yolk, then a few drops of clean distilled water. With a small, smooth ivory stick, you begin to mix. You watch as a magical transformation takes place. The dry, lifeless green powder, the sticky golden yolk, and the clear water all merge together. You work them over and over until they form a smooth, vibrant, and perfectly consistent liquid. It is no longer just a mineral. It is paint. You have created the color of the earth. This is the recipe for egg tempera, the primary medium for all panel painting and manuscript illumination in Europe for over 1,000 years. It dries very quickly to a hard, durable, and beautiful matte or low sheen finish, perfect for the detailed work of an illuminator. It is a strange and wonderful kind of cooking. Your ingredients are a semi-precious mineral from a faraway land, and an egg from a chicken probably named Henrietta out in the monastery's own coop. It is the ultimate fusion of the exotic and the profoundly mundane. Because egg tempera dries so quickly, you cannot blend colors smoothly on the page as you could with oil paint. To create shadows and highlights, to give your figures a sense of three-dimensional form, you must use a painstaking technique of cross-hatching. You must build up the shadows with hundreds of tiny, fine, individual brush strokes, like drawing with the very tip of the brush. It's another reminder that patience is the #1 skill required for this job, closely followed by having very, very good eyesight. Art conservators who study these manuscripts sometimes debate the precise recipes. Did different scriptoriums add other secret ingredients to their egg tempera binder? Some medieval treatises mention adding a drop of sweet fig sap, which would act as a natural plasticizer to keep the paint from cracking, or even a tiny bit of earwax, which was believed to slow the drying time just slightly. You repeat the process. You take a pinch of your precious, brilliant red vermilion and mix it with the golden yolk. Then, finally, with the greatest care, you take the smallest amount of your celestial ultramarine blue. You now have 3 small jewel-like pools of liquid color, gleaming in their seashell palettes. You have a beautiful set of paints, all made from scratch. You feel like a true master alchemist. You have turned rocks and a chicken's egg into pure liquid beauty. You're also slightly worried that Brother Philip will want his egg back if he ever finds out how you're using it. You look at your desk. The vellum page is waiting, the gold shining, the silver lines of your drawing a faint ghostly guide. Your palette of fresh, vibrant paint is ready. Your brushes are clean. All the long, slow, multi-step hours of preparation, the pouncing, the tracing, the gesso, the gilding, the grinding, the mixing, have all led to this single, final, and terrifyingly important moment. It is time to pick up your brush. It is time to paint. The moment is finally here. All the long, slow, patient hours of preparation are complete. You look at your desk. The vellum page is waiting, the brilliant gold already shining. The faint silver lines of your drawing a ghostly promise. Your seashell palettes are filled with the jewel-like colors you have just mixed. And now you must choose your most precious and personal tool. You must choose your brush. The brushes you use are not bought from a market. You have made them yourself, taught by the older masters in the scriptorium. They are objects of incredible delicacy. The handles are made from the hollow quills of a goose or a swan feather, and the bristles are made from the finest, softest animal hair available. For your broader brushes, used for laying down a base layer of color, you might use the fur of a stoat or a weasel. But for the most detailed work, for the lines of a face or the fold of a robe, you need a brush made from the winter fur of a squirrel's tail, often called miniver. You select your finest brush. It is a tiny, delicate thing. The tuft of reddish-brown squirrel hairs is so small, and comes to such a perfect needle-fine point, that it looks as though it is made of only a single magical hair. You roll the handle gently between your fingers. You are about to paint a masterpiece with what is essentially a well-behaved tuft of squirrel fur tied to a feather. The technology is simple, but the skill required is immense. The term miniature, used to describe the small paintings in these books, is a little misleading. It is often thought to come from the word minute, because the paintings are so small. But it actually derives from the Latin miniar, which means to color with minium, or red lead, as this was one of the common pigments used by the early illuminators. You dip the tip of your finest brush into the small pool of green paint you made from malachite and egg yolk. To ensure your hand is perfectly steady and does not touch or smudge the surface of the page, you place a bridge over the vellum. A small, raised piece of wood upon which you can rest your wrist as you work. You have your hand bridge, your single hairbrush, and your pot of egg-based paint. You are ready. The level of specialized equipment makes it feel less like painting and more like performing a very slow, very delicate surgical procedure on a piece of parchment. You take a slow, steadying breath, and you touch the tip of the brush to the page. You begin with the border. You apply the green paint to the tiny, curling ivy leaves you have drawn in the margins. The paint flows smoothly from the brush. It is a vibrant, living green against the creamy white of the vellum. The work is slow and layered. Because egg tempera dries almost instantly, you cannot blend colors. You must build up tones and shadows with thousands of tiny, individual brushstrokes, or by a process of cross-hatching, like drawing with paint. The world outside your small desk disappears. The scriptorium, already silent, seems to fall into an even deeper quiet. The only sound is the faint whisper of your own breathing. Your entire being is focused on the tiny, growing world at the tip of your brush. You are in a state of pure meditative flow. You are so focused that if the monastery were to be suddenly attacked by a band of marauding Vikings, you probably wouldn't notice until one of them tapped you on the shoulder and asked what you were painting. Art historians who study the techniques of medieval manuscripts sometimes debate the specific types of animal hair used in these brushes. Would a brush made from the slightly stiffer fur of an ermine have produced a different quality of line, a different texture of paint, than the incredibly soft and fine hair of a squirrel? Microscopic analysis of the brushstrokes on a 1,000-year-old page can sometimes reveal clues about the very tools the anonymous artist once held in his hand. You finish the green of the leaves. You clean your brush and move on to the next color. Perhaps the deep red of the small, stylized flowers that dot the vine work. Slowly, carefully, the border of the page begins to blossom into a garden of color, a beautiful frame for the sacred words of the text and the holy scene that is to come. The decorative elements are in place. Now you must turn your attention to the heart of the page, the reason for all this glorious decoration. It is time to begin the work of the miniature itself. The work of a medieval illuminator is one of layers. You have built the foundation of gesso, laid down the light of the gold, and painted the beautiful earthly frame of the border. Now, you must move from the decorative to the divine. It is time to work on the heart of the page, the miniature illustration that will bring the holy text to life. You turn your attention to the great, historiated initial B for Beatus Vir. Blessed is the man. Your task is to paint the author of the psalm, King David himself, seated on his throne and playing his harp, all within the enclosed space of the letter. This is the part of the job that separates the masters from the apprentices. Painting a pleasant-looking vine is one thing. Painting a recognizable human figure with expressive hands and a serene face, in a space no bigger than your thumbnail, is another level of skill entirely. You begin by laying down the base colors. You use your precious celestial ultramarine blue for the background behind the throne, creating a small window of pure, heavenly color on the page. You paint the throne itself, perhaps in a simpler, earthy brown. Then you take up your brilliant vermilion red for the king's flowing robes. You work slowly, carefully filling in the silver point outlines you drew so long ago. Then comes the most challenging part of all, the face and hands. The goal here is not realism in the way a later Renaissance painter would understand it. The artists of your time were not trying to create a lifelike portrait of a specific individual. The depiction of a holy figure like King David was a symbolic act. The goal was to create an image of serene piety and royal dignity, an icon that would inspire contemplation and prayer. For this, you need your finest brush, the one made from just a few precious hairs of a squirrel's tail. You are now painting with a tool that is, for all practical purposes, invisible. You are not so much painting as you are willing the color onto the page through sheer force of concentration. It is a deeply meditative and slightly terrifying process. You mix a pale flesh-colored tempera and with a touch as light as a hovering insect, you lay down the base color for the face and hands. You then use a slightly darker shade to add the faint lines of the nose, the mouth, and the closed, contemplative eyes. The final touch, the one that brings the face to life, is a single tiny dot of white paint placed in the eye to represent a glint of light of an inner soul. Art historians who study these manuscripts often debate the degree of individual expression found in these seemingly conventional miniatures. Can we identify the unique hand or the personal style of a single, anonymous illuminator through the specific way he painted the curve of an eyelid or the delicate shading on the fold of a robe? These tiny, subtle variations are the human fingerprints left behind by the artist. You paint the king's long gray beard with a series of fine, delicate white lines. You paint the strings of his harp with lines of liquid gold paint, called shell gold. The tiny, perfect world within the letter B is now complete. King David sits on his throne, his face a picture of holy contemplation, his fingers gently plucking the golden strings of his harp. He looks very regal and not at all grumpy. You consider this a major success. The painting is finished. The page is now a glorious harmony of perfect black script, shining burnished gold, and rich jewel-like colors. You lean back from your desk, your shoulders and back aching from hours of being hunched over in intense concentration. The work is done, and it is good. You lean back on your hard wooden stool, your body aching from the long hours of focused, unmoving concentration. You look at the finished page before you, glowing with its own inner life in the soft, northern light of the scriptorium. It is, you believe, the most beautiful thing you have ever made. And a strange, quiet thought enters your mind. Who will ever see this? In your world, there is no fame for the artist. You will not sign your name in the corner of your beautiful miniature. There is no concept of a gallery exhibition. No wealthy art collectors competing to buy the work of Brother Thomas. The very idea of personal fame for your art would be seen as a form of pride, a sin. You are a monk. You are an anonymous vessel, a pair of skilled hands through which the glory of God is made visible. Your work is not for you. It is ad majorem Dei gloriam, for the greater glory of God. This is the profound and central truth of your quiet life. You are not an artist in the modern sense, a genius expressing a unique, personal vision. You are a craftsman, a holy artisan, and your job is to beautify the Word of God. The purpose of the shining gold and the jewel-like colors is to honor the sacred texts they surround. It is to draw the reader's eye and their soul towards God, to make the act of reading itself a transcendent and holy experience. There is no comments section on an illuminated manuscript. There is no like button. The ultimate and only intended audience for your work is God Himself, and perhaps the abbot, whose opinion is also very, very important. And God, presumably, does not care how many followers you have on social media. You think about the future of this book. Once it is complete, months or even years from now, it might be used for the daily services in your own monastery's chapel. Or, as this is a particularly luxurious and expensive book, it might have been commissioned by a wealthy patron. It might end up in the private chapel of a great king or a noble duchess. A few dozen people, perhaps 100 at most, might ever lay eyes upon this page that you have poured your entire being into, and not a single one of them will ever know your name. While you would never sign your work, sometimes an illuminator would leave a tiny, secret, and very human mark of their presence. In the background crowd of a large miniature, an artist might paint a tiny, almost invisible self-portrait, his own face looking out at the viewer from across the centuries. Or he might hide his own profile in the intricate, swirling loops of a decorative initial letter. It is the medieval equivalent of an animator hiding a little joke in a single frame of a film, a secret message that says simply, "I was here. I made this." You briefly consider painting a tiny, self-satisfied looking monk in the corner of King David's throne, but you decide Brother Michael would probably notice and not approve of the theological implications. Art historians today, in a field known as connoisseurship, dedicate their entire careers to trying to identify the anonymous hands that created these masterpieces. By meticulously comparing the stylistic quirks from one manuscript to another, the specific way an artist painted an earlobe, or the unique flick of the brush used to create the folds of a robe. They can sometimes group different books together. They can identify the work of a single, unknown artist, to whom they will give a name like the Master of the Golden Vines, or the Brussels initials Master. They are trying to give a name to the ghosts, to honor the anonymous geniuses like you. Your reward is not fame. Your reward is the work itself. It is the deep, meditative peace of the process. It is the quiet satisfaction of creating a thing of perfect, enduring beauty for a purpose that you believe is greater than yourself. The pay is terrible, the hours are long, and you get absolutely no public recognition for your work. But the retirement plan is eternal, and the boss is literally God. So, all in all, it is a pretty good arrangement. Your page is almost complete. The colors are laid down. The gold is shining. But there is one last step, one final tiny detail that will bring the miniature from merely beautiful to truly alive. The page is a universe of color and light, but it is a flat universe. The gold is shining, the colors are vibrant, but the figures and the vines lack a sense of form, of life. To give your painting the spark of three-dimensional reality, you must perform one last, delicate operation. You must add the highlights. For this, you turn to your final pot of pigment. It is a small, heavy pot containing a dense, brilliant white powder. This is lead white, a pigment made by the alchemical process of corroding lead plates with vinegar vapor. It is the most opaque and brilliant white available to you, and it is the key to creating the illusion of light. It is also, like the vermilion, highly toxic. You take the smallest possible pinch of the white powder and mix it with a tiny drop of egg yolk binder. You pick up your finest, most delicate brush, the one that seems to be made of only a few squirrel hairs. You dip the very tip into the white paint, and then the final magic begins. With a hand that is now completely steady from a lifetime of practice, you begin to apply a series of tiny, fine, parallel white lines to the parts of your painting that would be catching the light. You paint them on the highest folds of King David's crimson robe. You add a thin, curved line of white to the golden frame of his harp. You place a tiny, almost invisible stroke of white on the bridge of his nose, on his cheekbones, and on his knuckles. The effect is instantaneous and miraculous. The flat areas of color are transformed. The tiny white lines create the illusion of light and shadow, of form and volume. The red robe now looks like it has real heavy folds. The king's face is no longer a flat shape, but a three-dimensional form. The figure seems to pop from the gilded background, suddenly imbued with life and substance. It is the most satisfying trick in your entire artistic arsenal. A few dozen carefully placed white lines, and suddenly your flat, red-robed figure has knees. It's an incredible effect. The power of a well-placed highlight cannot be overestimated. This technique of using opaque lead white for the final highlights was a standard and essential part of the Illuminator's craft. Because the fast-drying egg tempera was not easily blended, this method of applying highlights on top of the base colors was the primary way to model form and give a sense of realism and vibrancy to the figures and objects. After the highlights are in place, there is one last step to make the image truly sharp and clear. You take a very fine quill pen, dip it in the blackest ink, and with that same steady hand, you carefully outline the entire figure of the king and the main shapes of the border. This final crisp black line cleans up all the edges, contains the colors, and makes the entire composition stand out with a beautiful graphic clarity. So, the complete process is: prepare the skin, draw the ghost, apply the plaster, lay the gold, polish the gold, grind the colors, mix the paints, paint the base colors, paint the shadows, paint the highlights, and then draw the whole thing again in ink. The number of steps is staggering. It makes you tired just thinking about it, which is, I suppose, the entire point of this story. Art historians sometimes debate the division of labor in a large scriptorium for these final, crucial stages. Was there a single master illuminator like yourself who would paint the most difficult and important parts, like the faces and hands? And would less experienced apprentices be tasked with the more repetitive jobs, like filling in the large areas of a single color or painting the simpler parts of the border? The varying levels of skill that can sometimes be seen on a single manuscript page suggest this was often the case. You lay down your brush. You lean back and look at the page. It is done. The paint is still wet, but the work is complete. The little square of vellum is no longer a blank space. It is a window into a sacred story, a riot of black text, shining gold, and jewel-like color. You feel a deep, quiet, and weary satisfaction. You have successfully created a single page of a book. At this rate, the entire volume should be finished in another, 5 to 10 years. It is a job that teaches you to think in the very, very long term. The light from the high scriptorium window is beginning to fade. The day is ending, and as the shadows lengthen across the room, you hear a soft, familiar footstep behind you. It is the abbot, making his quiet end-of-day rounds to inspect the holy work. You rise to your feet and bow your head as the abbot approaches your desk. He is the spiritual father of your entire community, a man of great learning and great piety. He is the one who commissioned this magnificent new psalter, and his approval is the only judgment, apart from God's, that truly matters. He moves through the scriptorium with a deep and authoritative silence that makes even the usual quiet of the room seem to deepen. He arrives at your small desk and stops. He does not speak. He simply looks down at the vellum page you have just completed, which still rests on your slanted writing surface. This is the ultimate performance review. Your boss has arrived to silently judge the work you have poured your entire soul into for the past several days. You cannot explain your artistic choices. You cannot point out the particularly difficult curve of the initial B, or the delicate shading on King David's robe. You can only stand there in silence and hope that he likes your use of the color blue. It is an incredibly stressful moment. The abbot is the ultimate project manager for the creation of this book. The production of a single great illuminated manuscript was a massive and fantastically expensive undertaking for a monastery. It could take a team of scribes and illuminators many years to complete. The abbot was the one who had to secure the patronage, purchase the incredibly expensive materials, the hundreds of calfskins for the vellum, the precious lapis lazuli from the East, the pure gold leaf, and ensure that the final product was of a quality befitting a holy text and a powerful statement of the monastery's wealth and prestige. He reaches down with a hand that is surprisingly delicate for a man of his authority and gently picks up the page. He holds it in the fading afternoon light from the window, tilting it back and forth. You watch as his eyes take in every detail. He looks at the perfect, severe black script of Brother Michael. He looks at the intricate, flowering vines of your border. He tilts the page so that the burnished gold of the background flashes, catching the light like a mirror. He looks for a long time at the tiny, serene face of King David that you so painstakingly painted. That a single large, illuminated Bible in your time could be worth as much as a large farm or a prosperous vineyard. These books were not just holy objects. They were significant financial assets. Monasteries would sometimes even use their most valuable manuscripts as collateral to secure loans for new building projects. The book you are working on is not just a prayer book. It is a key part of the monastery's entire financial portfolio. The pressure to not spill your ink is, therefore, considerable. Historians often debate the primary motivation for the creation of these incredibly luxurious objects. Was it a pure and simple act of devotion? An attempt by the monks to create the most beautiful possible vessel for the Word of God, with no thought for earthly matters? Or was it also an act of conspicuous consumption, a way for a powerful and wealthy monastery or a royal patron to display their immense wealth, power, and sophisticated taste to the world? The two motivations, the sacred and the profane, were likely deeply and inextricably intertwined. After what feels like a lifetime of silent scrutiny, the abbot carefully places the page back on your desk. He looks up and his eyes meet yours, and he gives you a single, slow, solemn nod of approval. Then he places a brief, fatherly hand on your shoulder before turning and gliding silently on to the next desk. That is all. But that is everything. A wave of profound relief and quiet, humble joy washes over you. Your work, your long, patient, anonymous work has been judged, and it has been found worthy. The Abbot's Nod is the monastic equivalent of a 5-star review and a cash bonus. You feel a deep sense of satisfaction. You also feel a deep sense of thank goodness I did not mess that up. It is mostly relief with a little bit of professional pride. The day's great work is truly done now. It has been offered and it has been accepted. All that remains is the final practical step of putting your creation safely to bed for the night. The abbot moves on to the next desk, leaving a pool of quiet, profound satisfaction in his wake. Your heart, which was beating a frantic rhythm against your ribs just a moment ago, slowly returns to its normal, steady beat. Your long day's work has been judged, and it has been found worthy. But it is not yet complete. The page, with its fresh, damp paint, is still vulnerable. It must be put safely to bed for the night as the egg tempera paint dries. The moisture it contains can cause the vellum to gently buckle or cockle, to try and revert to the natural, curved shape of the animal skin it once was. If left to dry in the open air, your perfectly flat page could have a slight, gentle wave to it by morning, an unforgivable imperfection. It must be dried under pressure. You turn your attention to the corner of the scriptorium, where a large and imposing piece of equipment stands. It is the book press. It is a massive heavy-duty frame made of thick oak beams, with 2 great wooden screws that can be turned to press down on a flat platen. It is a tool of immense but very gentle power. It is the medieval equivalent of putting your precious work in a very, very heavy and very, very important folder for the night. The process is another slow and careful ritual. You wait until the surface of the paint is just touch dry. Then you take 2 perfectly flat, smooth wooden boards, larger than your vellum page. On the bottom board you lay a clean, soft piece of felt or linen, a cushion to protect the artwork. With the utmost care, you lift your precious page from your desk. It is the first time you have moved it since the abbot's inspection. You carry it over to the press and lay it gently on the soft cloth. You then place another piece of clean cloth over the top of the page, and then the second wooden board, creating a protective sandwich with your artwork safely in the middle. You slide this entire sandwich into the mouth of the great press. Then you take the handles of the 2 great wooden screws and you begin to turn them. You turn them slowly in unison until you feel them begin to bite. You are not trying to crush the page. You are applying just enough firm, even pressure to ensure that the vellum remains perfectly flat as the last of the moisture in the paint evaporates overnight. The book press was an essential tool in every scriptorium and bindery, used not just for this purpose, but also for keeping the sections of a book under pressure after the covers had been glued to the spine, ensuring a solid, square final product. Conservators today still debate the optimal amount of pressure to use in this process. Too little pressure, and the vellum might still buckle. Too much, and the beautiful, raised gesso and the burnished gold could be crushed and flattened, ruining the 3-dimensional effect you worked so hard to create. You, as a medieval craftsman, do not have pressure gauges. You have only the feel of the screw in your hands, an intuitive tactile sense born of long practice, of exactly how much pressure is just enough. Your page is now safe. You see that other finished pages from the Great Psalter are also in the press, each in its own protective sandwich, waiting for the morning. Your page has now joined the growing collection of completed work. Your day's artistic labor is finally truly over. All that is left is the quiet ritual of cleaning up. You meticulously wash your brushes, reshaping their fine tips to a perfect point before storing them. You scrape the unused, dried paint from your seashell palettes. You wipe down your inkstone. This is a mark of respect for your tools and your craft. A single stray speck of dried red paint in your blue tomorrow could create a slightly purplish sky, the kind of subtle artistic error that would cause Brother Michael to have a silent, but very intense and very disapproving breakdown. It is best to keep everything perfectly clean. The light outside the high scriptorium windows is fading completely now. A bell begins to toll, another deep, resonant sound that marks the end of the workday and the call to Vespers, the sunset prayer service. You and the other monks rise from your desks, your backs stiff. You have been sitting on a hard wooden stool for nearly 8 hours. You leave the silent, cool scriptorium, your mind quiet and your heart filled with the deep, calm satisfaction of a day's work well and truly done. You walk with your brothers through the now darkening stone cloisters. The day's work is done. The feeling of intense artistic concentration slowly drains away from you, replaced by a weary but deep sense of peace. You are heading back to the chapel for Vespers, the sunset prayer, and then after a simple supper for Compline, the final service that completes the day, you enter the chapel. It is different at night. The space, which was cold and gray in the pre-dawn darkness, is now filled with the warm, gentle, flickering light of dozens of beeswax candles. The atmosphere is not one of beginning a day of labor, but of bringing it to a quiet, thankful close. You take your place in the choir stalls. The chanting begins again, but the melodies for the evening prayers are softer, more gentle, more melodic. It is a lullaby for the monastery as the familiar, ancient words of the Psalms flow through you. Your mind reflects on the day. You see the vellum page in your mind's eye. You see the flash of the burnished gold, the deep, heavenly blue, the vibrant red of the king's robe. You feel the satisfaction of the abbot's silent, solemn nod of approval. You feel a profound sense of gratitude, not pride. Gratitude for the gift of your skill, for the peace and safety of this monastery which allows you to do your work, and for the quiet, purposeful rhythm of your life. You chant the ancient words. Your voice joins with those of your brothers, becoming part of a single, beautiful, and peaceful sound. It's also a good way to find out who in the monastery is tone-deaf. Brother Philip from the kitchen, you note, has a very enthusiastic but somewhat wobbly baritone after the final evening meal. You return to the chapel one last time for Compline. This is the simplest and most intimate service of the day. The prayers are for peace and for protection through the coming darkness. At its conclusion, the abbot gives a final blessing, and then he makes the sign for the great silence. From this moment until the matins bell rings before dawn tomorrow, no monk is permitted to speak a single word. It is a time for total, unbroken, and profound quiet. In some monasteries, this time of day would include the chapter of faults, a meeting where monks would publicly confess to small breaches of the rule, being late for a service, dozing off during a reading, or speaking when silence was required. It was a ritual of communal humility. You are glad there is no such meeting tonight. You would probably have to confess to having a moment of intense, prideful satisfaction over your finished page, which is almost certainly a sin. It's better to just keep that between you and God. Historians of monasticism debate the psychological impact of this enforced absolute silence. Was it a source of deep, inner peace and a powerful tool for meditation and connection with the divine? Or could it, for some, have been a source of intense loneliness and isolation in a life already cut off from the outside world? You walk back to the dormitory. The entire monastery is now wrapped in this blanket of great silence. The only sounds are your own soft footsteps on the stone, and the gentle hoot of an owl from the dark forest beyond the monastery walls. The only light is the pale, silvery light of the moon, shining down into the cloister garden. You reach your bed, the simple straw pallet that is the only thing you own, and even that is not truly yours. It belongs to the community. You lie down, pulling the rough, scratchy wool blanket over you. It is not a comfortable bed. It is, in fact, famously uncomfortable. But after a 16-hour day of prayer, intense concentration, and painstaking microscopic painting, a bed made of solid rock would feel like a feather mattress. You are asleep before your head even hits the pillow. Your day is done. The cycle is complete. The monastery sleeps. Deep in the dormitory, you, Brother Thomas, are lost in a dreamless, exhausted slumber. The stern scribe, Brother Michael, and the great abbot are also at rest. The entire community is wrapped in the profound peace of the great silence. And in the cool, dark, and now empty scriptorium, Your beautiful page rests too, held safely in the gentle, firm embrace of the great book press. Tomorrow, the matins bell will ring in the darkness, and the cycle will begin anew. You will wake, you will pray, and you will return to your desk. You will take the finished page from the press and begin the long, patient process on another. And so it will go day after day, month after month, year after year, until the great book is finally complete. Your name, Brother Thomas, will not be written in it. Your story will be forgotten. But your work, this quiet, patient, anonymous act of devotion, will endure. Centuries from now, in a world you cannot possibly imagine, a scholar in a great library, or a visitor in a museum will look upon this very page. They will marvel at the impossible brilliance of the gold, the deep, heavenly blue, the vibrancy of the colors. They will admire the serene expression on the face of King David, and they will feel a sense of wonder and a connection, across the great ocean of time, to the quiet, steady, and unknown hand that created it. They will never know your name, but they will know your work. And that is a kind of immortality. And so, our story of a single quiet day's work is now complete. The page is finished. The book is one step closer to its own long life. The memory of the tolling monastery bell, the cool scent of the vellum and the beeswax, the quiet, rhythmic scratch of the quill on the page, and the brilliant, dazzling flash of the burnished gold. All of these sounds and senses can now begin to soften and recede, like the details of a beautiful painting dissolving into a gentle, peaceful dream. The silent prayers have been said. The colors have been mixed and laid down. The gold is shining in the darkness. The work is done. The monastery is sleeping, safe behind its stone walls. The world is at peace. There is nothing left for you to do now, but to join in that deep, quiet, and well-earned rest.